Okay, so you guys have this night. Various stuff happens.
Mm-hmm.
You guys leave, and then the arrests happen afterwards.
Yeah.
But on that night,
Mm-hmm.
A woman gets brutally beaten and raped.
Yes.
That's correct.
Yes, indeed.
Now, just to put it in kind of a context, things like this were already happening in Central Park. There was a string of assaults and rapes already in Central Park.
Yeah, the guy was known as the East Side Rapist.
Okay. So the East Side Rapist was running around Central Park and raping people, but people don't know who he is at this point. Okay. So then, a couple days after the incident, you guys start getting arrested.
Mm-hmm.
When they arrest you, what do they charge you with? Well, what do they tell you that you're getting arrested for?
Originally, for me, because I had arrested that night, it was misdemeanor charges. So it was like trespassing, menacing, riot. It was stuff that was supposed to go to family court. So originally, we was given disappearance tickets to appear in family court, and we had to wait for our parents to come pick us up. And it wasn't until they found a jogger in like those wee hours of the morning that they thought she was gonna die, because they saw the condition and the state that she was in. And so they called a Homicide North Detective Squad, who came in and said, all right, well, let us question the boys, those that you have in custody.
Yeah.
Okay. And she was brutally beaten and raped. I guess like her skull was fractured and so forth. I mean, I guess at one point they weren't even sure if she was going to live.
Yeah, exactly.
They didn't expect her to live at all.
They didn't expect her to live. That's why they called a homicide squad to come on in, because they thought she was going to die.
We got to remember too, from the reports that everybody knows about, this lady lost about 3/4 of her blood, and it was amazing in terms of that whole scenario as well, because then when they arrested us, even when they arrested those of us afterwards, them telling us, hey, we need y'all to get your clothes that y'all wore that night and things of that nature, none of us having a drop of blood on us, nobody's skin. I mean, she obviously put up a fight, but, the way that they were trying to make the story sound, especially with Kevin Richardson, was that they tried to make the people believe that she had scratched him. But then when you tested the fingernails and did forensics and all of that stuff, nothing matched any one of us.
Yeah.
But they still pinned it on us, because, I always said that it was really more sexy for it to be 5, people of color brutalizing a young, probably wealthy investment banker at that time,
Right.
That's
who happens to be white, blonde, pretty.
Yeah.
So it made for some very compelling headlines.
Definitely.
Okay. So Raymond, let's go ahead and start with you.
Mm-hmm.
You get arrested. You get brought to the precinct.
Uh-huh.
At what point did they start questioning you about this?
Well, we was there until early in the morning. I think Kevin was the first one that they took into the room, and then I was second. And so you're talking like 6, 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. So by that time we was already there the whole night. And the line of questioning starts off very calm. It's like, just what happened that night? Tell us what happened. And so, I go through the story of who I was with, who I came with, what I saw that night, and that was it. And then it was like, but wait a minute, what about this woman? And I go, what woman? And they say, the woman who got raped. And I'm like, whoa, I don't know nothing about that. I never saw that. I don't know about that. And that line of questioning goes on for hours. And then I had my grandmother there who was sitting with me at the time, and she spoke very little English, but she can't carry a conversation. She just knew a lot of curse words in English, right? And so they had to translate between me and her. And so I guess that became problematic for them. And so it was like, all right, we got to get her out the room. And that's when it starts. And by this time, you're under, 3-4 hours of questioning, of not knowing what's going to happen. The pressure's just so great. And it gets even greater as the questioning goes on, And so for me, they started to do the intimidation tactics, right? They had an officer come in, he'll knock at the door, he'll bring my grandmother out, and he'll talk to her in Spanish. And while they got her outside, that's when they started to work on me. So, they'll bring an officer in, who's real tall, he gives me this look, threatens me, what the fuck are you looking at? At that point, I'm about 5'6", 120 pounds, soaking wet. And it just builds from there. It builds from there until they get me to a point that I feel like I'm so helpless, you know. And for me, that point came because with the officers coming in and out the room, it happened about 3 times. The third time is when the officer who's actually asking me the questions, where he just flips and he's like, I'm tired of this shit. He bangs on the table and he reaches for me. And at that point, I feel like I'm not going to make it out the precinct. I feel like I'm going to die, right? And at that same moment, a detective who comes in the room, sitting in the back, stops him. You know, starts yelling at him, cursing at him. What the fuck are you doing? You crazy? Get out the room. Kicks him out the room. And at that moment, I feel like he saved my life, right? And he sits there and he goes, Raymond, you a good kid. I know you ain't do this, but you got these guys in the other precincts and they saying you did it. I need your help.
Man.
And I'm like, so what the hell am I going to tell this dude? Because I don't know. I don't know the facts. I wasn't there. I didn't see shit. But what he does is he gives me a lifeline. He pulls out a picture of Kevin Richardson. He lays it on the table. And he says, you see this kid right here? Do you know him? I say, no. And he said, well, this is Kevin. You see the scratch on his face? That came from the jogger fighting him off. Now, we know he going to jail, but I don't want you to go to jail. So I need you to help me out. Give me something. And then he just sits back and he just looks at me and just waits.
Man.
And at that moment, as a 14-year-old kid, what are you doing? We're trying to figure out a lie to tell, something just to stop the pressure from overcoming. And that's how it goes.
I mean, this is classic good cop, bad cop.
Good cop, bad cop.
Wait. I want to just interject there because I knew that piece was going to come up in terms of the classic good cop, bad cop thing. But when you are in there and it's happening to you, TV can't paint that picture.
TV can't paint it.
So when we see stuff like that happen on TV, I usually tell folks that's about 50% of the reality of what really goes on. Like Raymond didn't think that the guy was faking. He thought the guy was about to kill him and come across that table.
Yeah.
But they probably scripted that stuff. Hey, listen, I'm gonna be the bad guy. You know what I'm saying? You make sure I don't go too far. You know what I'm saying? You know, and for us, we scared to death.
Never been through it.
Okay. So at no point do you ask for a lawyer or anything else like that? I guess you just don't even know about stuff like that at that point?
I mean, they read the Miranda rights, but at that moment, you're just so afraid, and it's the fear of the unknown that it doesn't even compute for a 14-year-old kid. You know what I'm saying? Unless you have that experience and you've been through it before, you don't know nothing. You know what I'm saying? Or unless a parent is there to say, hold on, wait a minute, I think we need an attorney. But if it's just me and him, he can read the damn Declaration of Independence, and I'm just like, all right, whatever, you know?
Oh, okay.
Man.
So at the end of all this questioning for you, Raymond, do you actually give them a story and admit to this crime that you didn't do?
Well, what happened was I didn't give him a story. All I said was, Kevin did it, because it's the only person I know who was telling me Kevin did it. And then he says, well, what did Kevin do? And I said, well, Kevin was struggling with the woman, right? So now he goes, okay, what did Antron McCray do? And I go, who the fuck is Antron? I don't even know who this dude is. But he's like, he's there. We know he did it. And I go, okay, so Antron was grabbing the lady's legs. And then he goes, what did Steven Lopez do? And I go, I don't know. But he says, you know, this woman lost a lot of blood. We don't even know if she's going to make it. Something had to be used. She had all these injuries in her face and around her head. Something had to be used. A rock, a brick, a pipe. So now he's feeding me what he perceives is to be the facts. And that's options. Pick one. And I go, okay, a brick. And he says, well, who had the brick? I say, Steven Lopez. And he goes, okay. Now, I don't write nothing down. He writes everything down himself.
Right. And this isn't being videotaped?
At that point, no.
Yeah.
At that point, no. He's just writing it all down. And, you know, when we get to my part, he says, okay, so what did you do? And I said, I ain't do nothing. I was just watching the shit. And he goes, well, that's not believable. If you're sitting there telling me a story, you got to make it more believable. You got to be in there somewhere. And so in my mind, a 14-year-old kid, I said, well, let me pick a let's roll, right? So I go, okay, well, I was there and I reached over and I grabbed the woman's breast. And he goes, okay, fine. He writes it down and he goes, all right, you did a great job. I signed the statement and then he goes, okay, I need you to do one more thing for me. And I go, what? He says, I'm going to send you to another precinct. You're going to tell another officer the same story and you'll be fine. You want to go home, right? This is you helping me, I'm going to help you. And that's how it goes.
Now, Yusef, what happened to you exactly?
Shoot. So they brought me in after all of that. They come to my house. Now, mind you, that night, I had on almost like a sky blue, I had on a sky blue jacket, sky blue pants, and I had a flat top, and I was about 6'3", 6'2", 6'3", since I was about 12 years old. So I was pretty visible. I was one of those guys that if I'm walking through the park as tall as I was, you'd be like, yo, who's that? Tall guy with a flat top, you know? Mm-hmm. So from what I understand, they kept saying there was this tall guy with a flat top with us. They do their investigation, start going to the surrounding neighborhoods. You know, any of y'all know about a tall guy with a flat top? Yeah, that sounds like that dude Kane, because that was my nickname back then. And so, long story short, they figure out where I live, figure out what my real name is, and they go up to my house to see if they can get me. In the meanwhile, I'm riding up and down the elevators missing them because I'm looking for them. Because when I came home from school that day, I bumped into Corey, and Corey said, yo, man, the cops are looking for you. I said, the cops are looking for me for what? And I asked Corey, I said, did you do something last night? Because I know I didn't do anything. He said, nah, man, I left almost right after I got in there. So I said, well, you know what? Let's go to the cops and let's tell them what we saw. And I'm going to be home before my mom gets back. Now, what's so crazy, and Raymond already knows, what's so crazy is that my name was on a sheet of paper of people that they were looking for as suspects. When I came around the corner to my apartment building after a few hours of us playing cat and mouse and not finding each other, they finally are in front of my door. They see me, they ask me, who am I? And I say, I'm Yusef Salaam. They look at the piece of paper and say, this is one of the guys we were looking for. They asked Corey who he is. He said, I'm Corey Wise. They look at the sheet of paper. They say, your name is not on the list, but you want to go downtown with your buddy? You'll be right back. Now, that's the craziest part about this story is that Corey spent 13 years in prison for this crime that he didn't commit. Yeah. Just because he said, all right, I'm going to go downtown with my boy, you know what I'm saying, just to make sure he all right. Not knowing that that was part of the tricks, you know.
Okay.
And so when they brought me down and brought us down into the precinct, Corey's 16, they already searched me in the hallway of my apartment building. They took my wallet, they took my keys, and they took all my keys. I had a little pocket knife, you know, with a jade bird on it. But in my wallet, I had a bus pass. Now, for folks who remember, these bus passes back then it was a piece of paper with a hologram on it that you wrote your name and your birth date on it. But I had my official hospital medical card in my wallet as well from Mount Sinai Hospital. So we go down to the precinct. They put us both in 2 separate rooms, and they start asking us about the night. Well, I knew they asked both of us because they asked me about the night. Things progressed, and they did the same thing. They was like, well, what about the woman? And I'm like, what are you talking about? What woman? I'm telling you, this is what I saw. Now, in the meanwhile, I hear them working on Corey in the next room, and they leave me alone for a while, and I ended up falling asleep. And I woke up, and I was wide awake to the sound of a loud bang. And I was immediately scared to death. I mean, like every hair on the back of my neck was on edge. And I'm like, damn, the heck is going on? And then I hear Corey yelling, okay, I'll tell you. I'm like, oh, shucks. Like Corey, Corey, if you ever get a chance to talk to Corey about who Corey was back then, Corey was the type of guy that if you was going somewhere, you'd be like, yo, Corey, come with me to watch my back. Because Corey was that dude. He was your ace in the hole. He'd watch your back, you know? So for me to hear Corey yelling in the next room like that, I'm freaking out. I'm scared to death. I'm like, yo, what the heck is this? They tiptoe back into the room that I'm in, and they look at me, and then they say, you're next. So by this point, I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what I'm gonna tell these people. Man, my mom don't even know I'm here. Because in my mind, I'm like, I was going to the precinct to tell them what I saw, and I was gonna be home before my mom got back. In the meanwhile, they had already, I don't know if they took Kevin and Corey back to the scene of the crime already, But sometime during that particular night, they took them back to the scene of the crime. Mind you, we didn't have any evidence of any kind of violence that we had done on our clothes. They tell Corey, hey man, your sneaker's untied. So Corey, you know, he bends down to tie his shoe. One of the other officers bumps Corey and tries to make him fall into the scene of the crime so that he can have some evidence on him that wasn't previously there. This whole thing was so manufactured. This is something that they wanted us to be guilty of. And I mean, the craziest part about this story too, is as these seasoned detectives were interrogating us, they knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that the stories that they were getting from everybody wasn't stories that was matching. So here, I mean, we're talking about guys who've been on the job for 20 plus years. This is the elite of the elite. These are the guys who you call in to solve crimes. And they're seeing already that none of these stories are matching, but they still went ahead with it. They still pinned this crime on us.
Okay, so you ended up admitting to the crime as well.
I didn't end up admitting to the crime.
No.
You did it.
This is the most interesting story. The most interesting part about this whole story is that after they finished interrogating Corey and they came back and interrogated me again, at one point, I think the Elizabeth Lederer or Linda Fairstein may have called one of the officers out of the room, whispered something to him, and then he looks at me and says, "How old are you?" And I said, "I'm 15. He said, "How come you didn't tell me that SHIT in the first place?" And then threw his notes across the room. Now, in my mind, I'm like, what does that mean? They made a false assumption in thinking because of my height that I was older than I actually was. You know, 2 weeks later, the detective that interrogated me wrote down a so-called statement that he said I made and I gave to him in the DA's office. Now he writes this down in the DA's office under her guidance. You see what I'm saying? My signature's not on it. I'm not on videotape. None of that stuff.
Yeah.
Right, because you're the only one that didn't have a signed statement.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, and I guess your mother interrupted the interrogation at one point?
This is from what I understand. She came and lo and behold, my mom actually found out that I was at the precinct, and she came there and she told them, "Look, you don't have my consent to talk to my son."
Yeah.
You know, and I always tell people too, like one of the most interesting things about this is that we have to understand that even sometimes when parents are in the room, that doesn't necessarily mean that the parent is savvy enough to know that this is a road that they shouldn't be going down.
Yeah.
There should be, in our case, and in all cases afterwards, there should be an advocate that comes in to be an intermediary between us, our parents, and the officers, to make sure that we're giving our fair due and our fair rights. Because at the end, who loses? The biggest losers in the game aren't the police departments of the world, isn't the DA's office, isn't the judges, isn't the mayor. The biggest losers are the taxpayers. Because here 13 years later, the truth came out about our case. It took another, 12 years for our case to be settled with taxpayers' dollars. Now that's truly unfortunate. That money should have came from the officers' pension fund, you know, the judges' retirement fund or something like that.